Hello, hello. Welcome to the Nomadic Spaces podcast, where we explore the intersection of interior design and small spaces. Today, I'm going to be talking about something really important, really near and dear to my heart, and that is why design matters. Why you should give a shit about interior design. I fell in love with interior design because it has the power to impact our living experience more than almost anything else in our life. The relationship we have with our home has one of the most substantial impacts in our daily life and psychological health. Today, we're going to get our history nerd face on and talk about the psychology of space, how we kind of discovered it, how science impacts interior design, and the scientific evidence that proves how a well-designed space does indeed result in better overall health, emotional well-being, elevated mood, increased productivity, and just generally a happier and more successful existence. Because this is such a meaty topic, I'm going to divide this into 2 episodes. First, we'll do kind of a Design Psych 101. And then next week in part 2, we'll be doing some implementation. So I'll share design strategies that are based on the psychology of design that we get into today. And hopefully that will be bring new meaning to your home and also give you some tools to implement in your own space to create a happier life. Let's get into it. So the history of interior design, we're really probably looking at the late 40s when folks started looking into this. And in 1947, Jonas Stock is in the University of Pittsburgh. He's brought in to help look for a polio vaccine. And the space that they put him in at the university is essentially a basement. They note that it's very depressing. It's a very depressing, dingy, dark room. I don't think there's any windows, being a basement. And he struggles. He's there for years and isn't able to create a vaccine. Years later, he basically burns out. He's mentally and physically exhausted. And he goes to Italy and he stays in a monastery. Which of course has beautiful architecture, high ceilings, big huge windows with natural light. And while he's there, he finally achieves his goal and is able to create a vaccine for polio. And he is able to recognize that he's the first to kind of have the awareness that the changes in his physical environment, the lighting, the sights, the architecture, he says it allowed his mind to unlock. And that's what enabled him to solve the vaccine. And there's a quote, this is from My Creative Space, which is a book by Daniel Ratner. I'll give him a shout out again at the end of this episode and next week because he's super awesome architect that talks a lot about psychology. So from his book, which references this study, there is a quote from Jonas Stock that says, "The spirituality of the architecture there was so inspiring that I was able to do intuitive thinking far beyond any I had ever done in the past," unquote. So again, he has the awareness that his environment, the changes in his environment, produced a different outcome, allowed him to produce a different outcome in his work. He's also the first to really call attention to the positive interplay of the mind, creativity, and our environment. And he's known now as the father of environmental psychology. And environmental psychology is the studies the influence of the built-in natural environments on how we think, feel, and act. So we're going to fast forward now to 1980. A man named Richard Ulrich comes along, and he is a medical biologist, and he kind of furthers this concept in environmental psychology in reference to patient recovery and experience. So he does a lot of studies where essentially patients with similar ailments that are bedridden in the hospital, he has half the patients in a room that has a window with a view to the park. So there's some kind of green treetops are referenced in the study. And the other half are in a room that doesn't have a window with a view. You're just facing other buildings. They call it hardscape. So again, half the patients have a view of just other buildings, and half the patients have a view of trees. And what he found is that the patients who had views of trees required less medication, they experienced fewer complications, and they were released more quickly. That's some pretty big stuff. So this study triggers the movement that we now know as EBD, evidence-based design. EBD is all over the place. You can probably, I think the easiest place to identify it is like in the advertising realm, where companies spend millions of dollars on research to design billboards, social media ads, apps, commercials, you name it, with, one goal in mind, which is to get you to buy or click or sign up or whatever they want you to do. Like digital ads, buildings have always also been designed to evoke calculated responses in the observer. Modern day, we can think of, if you want to go to, get a massage or go to a spa, typically they're going to have designed the space to evoke relaxation and peace and serenity and calm. But this concept goes back all the way to ancient Greece, where buildings were designed to evoke awe. Medieval masons made Gothic cathedrals to evoke reverence. And then palaces like Versailles were designed to evoke an impression of power. EBD is most prevalent in healthcare design, but has also made big impact in workplace design, educational, and residential spheres. EBD supports one of what I consider to be a key ingredient to an interior design success, which is a very deep consideration about the person or people who are going to be living or staying in that space and how they will be experiencing it. So thoughts like, what do you want them to experience? What do they want to experience versus what we want them to experience? And this is one of the first conversations I have on any project or consultation, because it really dictates how we want to design and how the space needs to change, which will determine the form and feel parts of the process. So next up, we're going to move a little further back to a study that was conducted in 1956. And you've probably heard of this dude before. You may have. His name is Abraham Maslow. And he is pretty well known for his, in psychology, spheres, because he came up with the infamous hierarchy of needs. And he is really considered to be the founding father of positive psychology. This study that he conducted in 1956, I think, has actually been kind of buried by his other work, like the hierarchy of needs and positive psychology research. This one's kind of under the surface, but I think it's super fascinating and definitely relevant to what we're talking about today. So he did a study in 1956 that proved that people enter a more positive state of mind when they're inside a beautiful setting than when they are in an ugly or average-looking surroundings. So his wife was apparently known for her artful eye and had a knack for interior decoration. And she designed his office. which is going to be one of the sites in his experiment. So Maslow's experiment, he essentially set up 3 different rooms, each called an experiment site, where volunteers would go in and they would show them a stack of black and white headshots, the same in each, for each participant. And they would ask the volunteer who's looking at these headshots to rank them on the energy and well-being. So the 3 sites, the first was what was called the beautiful room. And that was actually Maslow's office where his wife had decorated, big drapes, a big window, comfortable furniture, upholstered chairs, lush rug. She decorated with art and sculpture. And then downstairs they had what they called the average room. And it was a very basic room, so it was neat and clean, but otherwise super basic accommodations. And then, you guessed it, the ugly room was a repurposed room in their basement. It was very dark, dirty walls, not much furniture. The chair that was in there was very hard and uncomfortable. There was no decor. There was no natural light, and there was only one bare light fixture for light. And the results proved, I'll read it, quote, subjects who evaluated the photos in the average and ugly rooms were noticeably more negative in their scoring than the persons in the beautiful room. Examiners stationed in the basement space were observed to be more irritable, fatigued, and prone to complain about the assignment than those in the beautiful room, unquote. So the conclusion of this is the visual quality of our environment does influence how we think, feel, and act. A well-designed space results in people who are happier with themselves, more affirmative in their outlook on the world, and more energized to work in an aesthetically appealing setting than in a mediocre or chaotic environment. And more recently, again, this was back in the 50s, so more recently, neuroimaging studies, which uses brain scans, further this concept and back up Maslow's study, and really suggest that our human preference for the beautiful is deeply rooted in brain biology. So this is a little bit of background on interior design, why science says our surroundings make a difference. And I think that this is a good point to cut off, and we'll continue this conversation next week, which I'm going to go into. Basically, I'm going to give you an evidence-based design tip. We'll talk about what the psychology says about it, and then I'm actually going to tell you some examples of how you can implement that concept into your home. So you'll definitely want to stick around for that. And just want to make a quick caveat, because I think that, at least for me, when I think about scientific studies, it kind of feels like treating everyone, like everyone's going to have the same experience. Everyone in the beautiful room had these benefits as opposed to the others. And while I wholeheartedly believe that that is valuable information, just a reminder that scientific research, the best it can do is really just establish a probability that a design trigger or action will bolster such reaction across a broad population. Ultimately, in design, it is about finding what works for you. So while a lot of this, I think is worth considering because it does apply to most of a population, not everything might resonate with you, and that's okay. And I think that's what is really a key part of an accessible interior design. There is not one design that fits all. It really needs to be based not only on the, specific space and condition, but also the specific aesthetic and lifestyle needs of the person or people that are going to be staying in it. how they're going to use that space. And that is really my mission in my business. That's why I created this podcast as well, to really help people understand the impact of their home and how to implement the things that are going to help them reach a happier home. So if you're interested in how your home can be happier, I would love to chat. There is a link in my show notes to schedule a free call, no strings attached. Just want to say hi, connect. I'm a big connector, so please reach out just to say hi, give feedback. If you have an idea for a future podcast topic or would like to share some of your design challenges that we can address in a future episode, there is a link in the show notes, so please check that out, and don't be shy. I use all of that feedback to help further future episodes and make this podcast really geared to what you want to listen to. So again, thank you so much for being here. If you have a second and you haven't yet, please subscribe to this podcast, rate, review, share. All of that is literal gold in podcast currency, and costs nothing. So if you were looking to support me or this podcast, please consider those options. And I am super excited to connect next week and keep talking through design psychology and how we can use that to make our homes a happier space. Ta-ta!